So let's open this up now. And Ellen, are you going around with a microphone? Okay. What's your name? Who's got the microphone? Oh, Ellen. All right, you're going.
I'll pass it to Eleanor.
Okay. So Ellen Woodsworth is just raise your hand and she'll come over to you. And what I'm going to suggest is that we hear a few comments, questions from folks, and then I'll ask you guys to respond so we can get as many people as possible to voice whatever you want to say. And but again, brainstorm and think about what do we got to do? What do we got to do to stop this bill? Okay, Ellen.
Eric would like to say something.
Well, I got 2 points here I'd like to bring up. Maybe Jim Sayre is a lawyer. He might be able to answer this. This legislation, Bill C-30, would be justified constitutionally as an exercise of the federal government's jurisdiction under criminal law, or what? Is it really criminal law? And if it's not, can't you challenge it on constitutional grounds? The second point is why not suggest or somehow get the ball rolling on getting a referendum in which all voters in the country would vote on the question.
Okay, thank you. Very good suggestions. Who's next? No, I was only going to comment that voting on the right. Okay, let's get you on the microphone because we're this is live stream, so people are watching it actually on the internet, and I'm sure they'd love to hear what questions and comments are coming up.
No, I just wanted to say that the idea of voting on something that is an inherent right is usually a bad idea.
I'm wondering if it might be an idea to reach out to David Orchard and other folks in the Conservative Party who historically have been quite socially progressive. Also, when you were talking, Michael, about some of the debunking, I'm wondering if folks through Open Media, if you might have some folks who'd be interested in making Spidey Sense videos and explaining some of that kind of stuff.
Sorry, what kind of video?
Videos that be online that would be, Michael was characterizing that the warrant standards as being Spidey Sense.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Someone just raised the question, did you ask if everybody's okay being filmed? There's someone taking photographs, so we want to make sure everybody's okay with that.
No, I didn't ask that. If there's anybody who doesn't feel comfortable with that, can you just let us know and we'll, I'm not sure who's taking photographs, but... Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, if anybody doesn't feel comfortable, just, what's your name? Put your hand up.
Right behind you.
Right, someone right behind you. Okay. Okay. All right. Other questions or comments? Yep.
Just to Michael's point about about needing to reach out to Conservatives, I think this far from an election, it's going to be hard to reach out to their base because they're not going to care about them until 3 or 4 years from now. I think really we need to focus on reaching out to the caucus, and there's a lot of, I mean, if we're somehow able to convince 12 of the Conservatives to vote against the bill, which is a huge leap for them at this point, we could defeat it. And I'm curious if you have any suggestions as to how do we find those Conservatives that are most likely to oppose. I know there's been at least one that's spoken out about it. I've heard about others, but I don't know who they are. I think that it would be great if we somehow had a tool where we could just say, these are the ones that are uncomfortable about it, or based on their past statements or whatever, where they've spoken out about the long gun registry or anything like that, who is likely to cave, essentially, on this, and how do we find them, and how do we engage with those people?
Okay, why don't we come back to our panel, and if any of you would like to make some responses. I kept notes of what came up, but just feel like tackling whatever you want to in terms of response.
I'm going to jump in on the question of the constitutional challenge. The BCCLA report, not to be a hammer one note, Johnny one note here, but that actually is an entire analysis of what we think is constitutionally suspect in terms of the last iteration of the bill, very, very similar. There's no question that every component of this bill is going to see a constitutional challenge. But I'm concerned about that for a few reasons. One, that's already been mentioned here, we don't want to wait for that to happen. Two, the infrastructure that we'll be building in terms of the back doors into the system, that's going to be very difficult to come back from, regardless of what the constitutional challenges results are. But finally, it's very difficult to adequately look at our privacy rights through the filter of Section 8 of the Charter, which requires that you are you're making a claim that your right to be secure from unreasonable search and seizure has been violated. And when we vet that, we are inevitably looking at a court scenario where someone who's been found with the bag of cocaine in their trunk is making the argument. Where this kind of bill is really positing that this is happening to all citizens everywhere, we want to highlight that where the trunks are empty, it's still a violation of your rights. And that's very, very important. And because we filter our privacy rights through the criminal law in the Constitution, we have a very, very narrow spectrum, and it's very hard to get a real sense of what's at issue filtered through the criminal law in that way. It's a weakness of our Constitution, I would argue. So that's one of the reasons we don't want to wait, but regardless of what happens here, this will be challenged, every iota of it. But we just don't want to get there for all kinds of reasons. And if you want to see the arguments that are going to be made, they're in the report.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Other members of the panel, do you want to? Yep.
I just want to ask, how many people have cell phones here? Almost everyone has cell phones. And I want to point out what Michael said earlier on. It's absolutely correct. When somebody has a cell phone, a law enforcement agency person or anybody designated by the minister could walk in here and find out the name of everyone in this room within, just walking in, walking out, and going to the telecommunication service providers and then getting your name. And that's what's really, really troubling. I just wanted to highlight that. And we did that right off the bat when the bill came out on February 14th on Valentine's Day. And that is scary. That is really, really scary because the government will have access to all of the names, everybody whether they're protesting against the government or any other issue, environmental issues, and that's a scary thought.
So I wanted to quickly speak to a couple of the ideas that have come out so far. The Spidey Sense video and the Conservative Outreach Tool specifically are just amazing ideas. Something that you may not know about openmedia.ca is that we are 3 full-time employees with really messed up sleep schedules, and we really rely on Canadians to keep us going and to come up with these kind of innovative things that will help us do things like reach out to new demographics, as Michael Vonn pointed out, and make sure that the people who we are reaching are being engaged on multiple levels and engaged in such a way that will be really effective. So yes, please do make a Spidey Sense video. Please do send us emails. Contact at openmedia.ca is being monitored vigilantly, and we reply as much as we humanly can. We have a team of dedicated volunteers and interns. We have people like Glyn who work really closely with our volunteers. And one of the really interesting projects that Glyn has headed up is a conservative outreach project where we've actually gone to a volunteer of ours who, it turns out, was a very strong conservative. She calls herself a principled conservative, and reached out to a group of people who she had access to sign a petition to basically with the message saying that we are conservatives, conservative government, we are your constituents, we are the people who are going to be responsible for voting you in again. We want to be happy with our decision, so please do make the right choice when it comes to this bill because we are against this. So, doing things like that, tools to reach out to talk about the likelihood of backbench conservatives caving, or conservatives who might be appealed to on different levels is an amazing idea. We would love to see that. We would love to see somebody begin to build that, and we're incredibly grateful for the help we've had so far, and we're really excited to keep going, and hopefully every single one of you will be able to contribute in some way from spreading the word to creating something really innovative and exciting. So.
Jim, do you want to add something?
Yes, I do. As far as the Conservatives are concerned, Harper was quoted as saying shortly after the election that he wanted the Conservatives to become the natural governing party of Canada. Whatever some of us may think of that idea, he's not in it for just one election. And I don't think it's right to say that they don't care what their base thinks or they don't care what voters think. They do care, and they know that voters have memories. The second point about that is that this is not a conservative idea. This was introduced by the Liberals in 2002. It was brought back again by the Liberals in 2005. And when it was brought back in 2007 by the Conservatives, when Stockwell Day was the minister, he actually fell on his sword and said, well, the bureaucrats misled me. I didn't realize that the bill would allow us to gather information without a court order, and he withdrew it. It's a remarkable action by a minister to do that. So the Conservatives have been relatively moderate on this issue in the past, and I don't know why they've decided to cave in. I think the pressure is coming from the police chiefs. The wet dream of the police, let's face it, they want to have a database of everybody who lives in Canada, and they want to know all about us. They want to know every piece of equipment we own, every IP address we've ever used, every email message we've ever sent. So who knows, maybe someday they could prove something against us by having that. And you know, a conservative, a small c conservative party, whatever it's called, which believes in civil liberties and privacy, is perhaps a strong natural ally of the public against that sort of desire on the part of the wrong kind of police officers. I don't want to suggest that the police are all megalomaniacs, but there is that tendency. You know, one of the things we've got to fight is this notion you probably heard, well, I don't care if they read my email because I got nothing to hide. We know that's wrong. We don't feel that way ourselves, and we've got to keep reminding the government of the fact that, no, we don't have anything to hide, but we still don't want you reading our email.
Thank you, Jim. And I'll just add a couple of things. I think another notion we have to fight is that we can't defeat the bill. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, we've gotten to this point where we're so paranoid and concerned about this Conservative majority government that we've put ourselves in a position that there's virtually nothing we can do. And I think we've got to put ourselves out of that box. So I think some of the suggestions that are being made tonight, and I just want to focus on one that was raised about reaching out to Conservative members. I mean, I think it's good to find, you know, big names like a David Orchard, you know, I mean, I think that's great. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, this is about slog work. And I know Open Media knows this and other groups. And it is actually about lobbying. And some people are very afraid to take that on. And I'm not talking about corporate lobbying. I'm not talking about the big guys who are all behind closed doors. I'm talking about community lobbying. And, you know, when we get out in the streets and we have rallies and we do actions, those are very important. But we also have to work at another level, and that is actually you have to, you know, person by person start breaking down, as someone said, the myths about this bill and getting the truth out. And you have to do that by breaking into those Conservative ranks. So if we're serious about defeating it, it does mean that we have to have a very systematic plan. So, for example, here in the Lower Mainland, in Metro Vancouver, you know, there's NDP members, there's Liberal members, there's also Conservative members. And if we actually strategically begin campaigns of those constituents, you know, in West Van, North Van, Richmond, Coquitlam, where there are Conservative members, and actually start, when someone said, well, how do we find out, if we try to get those 12 Conservatives, how do we find out where the weak links are? Well, mostly we'll only find out when we go to meet them. And you actually have a face-to-face conversation, and you can begin to see that someone is beginning to question the legislation. And then from that, you develop a list of people that you think you can then continue to work with. And so really, I mean, it's hard work, but if we're very serious about this bill, it's got to be done. And I think a lot of groups in Canada have been looking for a piece of legislation that we could defeat. See, C-10 was almost a done deal from day one, right? They rammed it through. There was a lot of opposition to it. the gun registry was almost a done deal. There was a lot of opposition to it. But this bill has gone across all sectors and all political beliefs, I suspect, because it does have this sort of civil libertarian privacy aspect to it. And so I think that this is the bill because they have now backed off. I mean, so first of all, there has already been a victory that they haven't yet proceeded, and we're going back to Parliament on Monday, and we'll see whether or not they try to come forward with this bill. But my guess is they're kind of reassessing where they're at. And they're probably polling, they're probably talking to people. So this is the time to organize around it. And so, you know, to come back to my point, let's not spook ourselves that because we're dealing with a very nasty, ideological, conservative majority government that we can't actually deal with that and take it on. Because I think here is an opportunity that we could build that kind of very broad movement if we are strategic and if we're really, really organized at all of those different levels, whether it's legal, internet, activism, but the lobbying as well. So that's my 2 cents worth. Ellen, we'll go back to you with other people who want to say something.
Somebody asked how many people had cell phones, and most people here did, and Libby Davies and Open Media, and I have, all three of us have just tweeted this. So if you could just take 2 seconds to retweet those tweets, it would be great. And also anybody who wants to pick up tonight's forum, you can go to Rabble and pick it up and spread that around, because I think this was an incredible forum, a lot of good information, and we need to get that out to people.
It's rabble.ca, and it's independent news media site, and it's being live streamed on Rabble, so people are watching it on the internet, and I'm pretty sure that Rabble kind of archives the material and you can go look at it another time. So if you know of people who would like to hear what some of these fantastic points and arguments have been tonight, because I think they've been like really solid, then there's an opportunity for people to do that. Okay, do we have other folks who want to make a comment or a question? Yep.
I feel bad. I'm either looking at you guys or you guys. Okay, so one, I'd like to start off by saying one of the things that we can do as citizens is pick up a book. You can actually go online. It's free. One of my heroes, Cory Doctorow, wrote a book called Little Brother. It kind of gives you an idea about encrypting your emails, things like that. That's something that we can all do as citizens that make bills like C-30 null and void anyway, because your information is encrypted. They can't get to you. Now, what one of the things that I heard from the NDP, and I wanted to more clarify, was the idea that we should send this back to the table. And I know that's kind of more political speak, that we just want to get rid of it altogether. But I ran an article. I wrote an article. I did some investigation, and I actually found that there were multiple IP addresses in Parliament that were torrenting or downloading files for different movies and music and stuff, and I thought it was very interesting. And I guess where I'm going with that is anybody can be attached to an IP address either through an open Wi-Fi network or anything like that. So an IP address doesn't actually relate to a person. So what I would ask is, would you guys be more willing to, so we can stop these C-30s and anything like it, actually come out and say, we're going to be against anything that identifies a person by their IP address, because that would solve all the other problems.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Yep, at the back.
I was just wondering if there's any possibility for something like this to actually escalate into like a robocalls to the power of hundreds, where we've seen quite often how the RCMP is quite cozy with the Conservatives, and charging in the 2008 election, spreading rumors about charging one of the cabinet ministers, I think it was the Minister of Finance at the time, with crimes, and I'm not sure if they actually did it, but they made a bunch of noise about it, and that ended up giving the Conservatives their first minority. I think it might have pushed them over the edge. Also, as far as actual tactics or strategies, I would like to see someone make somebody do a series of speeches using the exact text that the Conservatives used to bring through the gun registry, and then replace the egregious parts with, you already covered this, Okay, with the actual, this particular bill. I'm also kind of curious as to if the NDP has databases, information of conservative voters who are in the high tech business. I mean, there's a lot of high tech around Ottawa. There's a lot of high tech in Waterloo, where the MPs from those areas can be, or not even MPs, but just go talk to the people in the businesses who are conservative supporters and say, ask them if they're interested in this, because I can't see how it's crazy. It's kind of like I heard somebody say, I thought 1984 was a warning, not a methodology, not a syntax for the Conservatives to put their ideas into play. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I love your idea of making a speech out of the comments on the gun registry. I think that's an incredible idea. It would get a lot of attention. So maybe somebody can take that up. So anybody on the panel want to respond? Jasbir?
Actually, I was thinking about that myself, and if you do, there's a possibility that I will do that in the House of Commons. I'll have to find the speech. You talked about voters and the Conservative voters that we can talk to. There was a poll out back in February 24th. 64% of the Canadian rejected the idea of handing this 6 pieces of information to the government. And that's across Canada. And the poll results in Alberta, there were 66% who rejected the 6 identifiers, the 6 pieces of information. So the support is there, the base is there, and this is right across from different political spectrums in regards to NDP, Liberals. This issue is, I believe, is a non-partisan issue. It goes to the core values of what it is to be Canadian. So I think that's why it's just resonated. When I talk about the question this gentleman raised, the Liberals, they introduced this bill back in 2002, 2005, and again the Conservatives brought this back in 2007. The NDP has always been against these kinds of draconian ways to collect information on Canadians, and it basically is surveillance of Canadian lives. So we have been very clear from the onset in regards to having this sort of information being collected by law enforcement agencies and without a warrant. And that's really, really troubling. So our positions have been very clear in regards to this particular set of bills that have been brought forward over the last decade or so. You talked about some of the things that NDP would do. What strategies do we have? We have a number of, yes, it is another way of saying, we'll send it back to committee or go back to the drawing table. It is a political talk in regards to rework this bill, and that's going to be acceptable not to the NDP but also to large amount of Canadians out there. So we do have a number of strategies that we will use, whether it's in committee or in the House, that we will be providing amendments to the bill, and those are the kind of things we have them in place, and we'll be bringing forward in due for time when the time comes.
Can I jump in?
We'll just go to the rest of the panel and we'll come back to it. So, Michael?
I was just going to say, in terms of our advocacy efforts and our education efforts, I think it helps a lot, and it's part of it's part of the PR, but it's actually just the truth here. Surveillance is the enemy, not the police. And for people who are concerned about the police having a problem, then the obvious solution is for us to have the evidence of what the problem is, and then every privacy advocate in Canada will help shape the appropriate, proportional, constitutional tools to address that problem. So we don't want to get into a kind of a polarized, police bad, police good. Civil libertarians are often critics of the police, but as we say, nobody enjoys their civil liberties in a jungle. We need appropriate constitutional policing. Police need tools, but the question is, what are they? And that's really what's at issue here. Not do the police need tools, what are the appropriate tools? And what is the evidence that this massive expansion in their current tools is required? And so if we stay focused, because we keep hammering home on this issue of the evidence, but we can't have this discussion without knowing what the shape of the problem is. And that's part of why we're getting the kind of rhetoric that we are, because the shape of the problem has never been defined. And I think we do a service to our nonpartisan attempts to bring this under a big umbrella to say, keep it principled in terms of what the issue is here. And I think that will help a lot towards kind of holding hands across all party lines.
Okay, anybody else? Jim?
Yeah, just a quick comment about the idea of doing a mashup of the conservative speeches. Don't forget the census debate. That was also about people's privacy and about criminalizing honest people. And don't forget the fact that the Conservatives were in opposition in 2002 and 2005, and it would be very interesting to see what they said about the Liberal bills at that time. It'd be wonderful if we could find some quotes by Harper about them. But any Conservative who stood up then and said we don't need this legislation, we can use that. The comment in the back, I'm also a fan of Cory Doctorow. I've read Little Brother, I loved it. The idea of using encryption per se wouldn't work, because what the police are really after here with the IP address, they don't care about the content of the message. They're not trying to decrypt it necessarily. They'd have to get a court warrant for that anyway. But what they want to know is who's sending it, because as Michael said, they want to know everybody who's at a rally. You know, if you were at the Stanley Cup riots, maybe you were just a spectator. But if you were there and your cell phone was on, they'd love to put you in a database, and you'd be on somebody's bad list at that point for future reference. The one thing that could be done in the way of self-help if this bill ever passes, and it's something I've certainly thought about in terms of our work, is anonymizers. There are anonymizing servers. Everything you send out from your computer goes through some other server, sometimes in another country, and the police run into a brick wall when they try and trace it back to you, because all they know is that the intercepted message that they happen to be interested in was sent to some anonymizing server, and they can't go any further because the server doesn't keep records. So that would be something to look pretty hard at, but let's defeat the bill and not have to worry about measures like that.
I just really want to quickly speak to this server idea, because it really is very interesting. But what it does really bring out, and I mean, we want to make sure that we have policy-based solutions more than anything else, because not everybody is capable of using these anonymizing features of being able to rework a server, of being able to use these things. And we really want to make sure that the internet is an open and accessible democratic platform for everybody, regardless of their technical skill level. But what this argument really does bring out is the fact that this lawful access bill, in its infinite glory of making a large registry of our data, of multiple simultaneous intercepts, it might not work. A lot of people will be able to get around this. A lot of people will be able to figure out ways of evading this online surveillance technology. And internet service providers are going to keep on having to dump in money, in all likelihood your money, into making sure that they're constantly updating their networks, that they're constantly trying to keep up with the people who are one step ahead of them, that constantly trying to keep up with the people who can do the things that you're talking about, whether those people are criminals or whether those people are just trying to get a normal sense of privacy. So really we're talking about this huge waste of time, of effort, and for what? For nothing.
Okay, just one. I'll come back to you. I find it interesting that in the discussion we've had tonight, we really haven't talked about child pornography. I mean, we touched on it at the beginning, so it's sort of stating the obvious, but this bill is absolutely not about child pornography. And somehow we've got to get this across to people, because it is a tactic that's used by the Conservative. They push people's buttons. It's kind of the politics of fear. we saw it on the drug crime bills, right? You know that drug traffickers are going to be harassing your kids in the schoolyard, right? And that was their line over and over and over again. So I do think it's very important for us to keep getting this message out that it's actually not even about child pornography. This is about surveillance. It's about intelligence gathering. And I just wonder if Michael or others might want to answer, how concerned should we be that this bill is related to a bigger initiative around data gathering, as it might be related to, for example, Homeland Security in the U.S. I don't know what's going on there or whether they've already done this kind of thing, but I'm curious to know how much we should be linking it to that in terms of data gathering overall that's being used now for just general security, intelligence, surveillance purposes.
Link it. Absolutely. There's two things that I want to say about that. Other jurisdictions that have gone down this road, and there are some, the UK and the US are the two examples that we cite in our reports. What the evidence suggests, because we're very big on evidence-based policymaking, is that there is no discernible increase in the clearance rate of crimes, but there sure as shooting is a discernible increase in the surveillance of general public. The dragnet surveillance absolutely increases. We know that because of, as I say, the other jurisdictions have already done that experiment for us. So that's very concerning. We need to keep in mind that Canadians' information given to law enforcement, collected by law enforcement and collected by intelligence, is not staying within Canada. We have a secretly negotiated perimeter security agreement that is seeing a lot more of this information flowing to the U.S. We expect with quite devastating results. We've already seen in a report that you probably haven't come across, it was buried someplace, I can't even remember the website that I found it on, drug enforcement teams' collaborative efforts, U.S., Canada, actually reference the need to get lower standards to get information from telcos. This is referenced in their plans to do this kind of cross-enforcement coordinated efforts. So, yeah, the ramifications of this, of, finding yourself somehow mysteriously on the U.S. no-fly list, increasingly becoming the Canadian no-fly list by de facto, et cetera, is really serious. And so we have all of these nested concerns. And these are the kinds of things that we need if this does go to committee, and I hope it doesn't. We need all kinds of expert testimony to explain. But the idea that this information is merely on a Canadian database, as bad as that, is just the tip of the iceberg. Thanks for mentioning it, Libby.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I think we've got time for a couple more questions and comments. I'm aiming to get you out of here early. So, yes, Travis, you wanted to, if Ellen, you could come to the front.
Okay, so can I address it real fast and I'll go back? Is on the servers, the Pirate Party of Canada actually runs a VPN. It's an anonymizing server. And if you sign up, you get part of your money back on your taxes. So it's a win-win. So back to your question, and to try to make it a little more specific, you keep saying with warrants and going back to the drawing board, but what I believe, and what I believe a lot of us believe, is that even warrants shouldn't be issued based on IP addresses on people, because an IP address isn't me. My wireless network is open. Anybody can do something on my network. That doesn't make it me. So I believe, and I believe a lot of us believe, that we should have no IP association with a person, and any criminal or legislation should not go through with that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there's agreement on that, and I think it reinforces the point that Michael is making, and that is we already have a system of warrants where there is reasonable grounds or evidence to go further, and one of the dangers of this bill is actually lowering the bar for that from a legal perspective. So that's something to be really aware of. Okay. Any final questions or comments from audience members? Yep.
Just getting back to the brainstorming thing, a few things people have said were sparking ideas for me. One is, I'm wondering if it might be an idea for people to write really constructive emails to police chiefs if the police chief are behind this around surveillance, around the piece that you were mentioning, Michael, around inappropriate tools. I was also wondering, like, I don't know, open media folks, if you guys send out suggestions about, or if you might consider sending out suggestions to your members as a result of this forum, but I was wondering if it might be useful to have a blog or a video or some kind of tool about how to talk about this bill with your friends, families, and coworkers. Some thing that might increase people's skills and confidence in doing that. I also was wondering if there might be an way to identify generally the Conservatives who've spoken for privacy and things in the past, and that might also be a means to mobilize people to contact their particular MPs if we know who those MPs are.
Okay. Anybody else? Yep.
I guess one last comment, because there's some really, really good ideas that are being generated out of this conversation. And so one of the things, if you're interested, and anyone in the room who's interested to continue this conversation about what we can do in this room to continue to take action and to continue to fight these bills, Lindsey mentioned the email address. It's contact@openmedia.ca. It's a really good way to get plugged into our community. And the second way to continue this conversation is to go to openmedia.ca/team. And there you can identify that skill set that you're most interested in. So maybe if it's public engagement and doing a petition drive, maybe you've got some video skills to do a mashup. That's a really good way to continue the conversation using open media as a platform.
Okay, thanks, Glyn. I just to comment on the last suggestion, I do think that if we are going to follow up, we actually have to have an organization, or maybe it's open media, but knowing your capacity is probably really stretched. But there has to be a much more systematic way of like lobbying MPs and getting through to them. I mean, we could do that in Metro Vancouver. It's doable. It takes work, and you have to like work it out, but it is very doable. So I think that's one thing that we could consider taking up. And in terms of your suggestion about contacting police and trying to inform them as to what the public concerns are, I think that's a very good idea. My sense is it would be very difficult for individuals to do that. You could try writing emails to the police chief, see if you get a response. But it may be something that organizations can take up by actually going to the police board. Let's remember in I think all of our communities, not just Vancouver, here I'm being very Vancouver-centric. Do you have a police board in Surrey? Okay. So there are police boards that are appointed by municipalities and the province. Those individuals on those boards are members of the community. So that would be like a very possible avenue to try and actually make presentation to police boards and to say, are you aware that your department is actually, promoting this, or maybe they're not, but even trying to get the message over that way. So that's another sort of avenue of kind of expanding the horizon of who we're speaking to is police boards. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do is suggest that we kind of wrap up. If you want to respond to what's been said, and then if you've got any concluding comments, we'll start at that end and work our way down. So, Jim.
Okay. No, I was just going to add to your last comment that police boards are controlled by municipal governments, and municipal governments, police boards or police chiefs are not elected, but mayors and council members are, and you can talk to them certainly.
Yep. Any final comments you want to make?
Nope,
Jim?
I'm good.
Not really. No.
Pearls of wisdom. We'll come back to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Michael?
Nope, I'm good.
No?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Give you the mic.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add that, being in this room is really inspiring, and it is a huge reminder that, we are winning. This is what winning looks like. I am in a room right now with very significant members of parliament, with a lawyer who I've idolized since college, with a man who runs a network that is just a complete reworking of how the internet should work in general, and with people who are coming up with ideas, kind of, it seems off the top of their heads in this room that will blow me out of the water, and I've been working on this for God knows how long at Open Media. So please email contact@openmedia.ca. I'm not kidding. Please join us on Facebook. We have an incredibly brilliant community that participates via our Facebook wall. You would not believe what goes on there. Please, make those videos. Please write those blog entries. We are excited to support your work. We want to be the platform where Canadians can have a voice, and we are excited to help you and facilitate that. So, email contact@openmedia.ca. You can approach us afterwards. Glyn's here, passing it on.
Thank you. I want to thank you for coming out here tonight. I think efforts like this community effort, grassroots effort, that's how we're going to be able to defeat this particular bill. And personally, I've gotten a lot of good ideas. Right from the gun registry speech to identifying the Conservatives who may be vulnerable on this particular issue, and also looking at the speeches made back in 2002 by the Conservatives. So I've got a number of ideas that I'm going to take back to Ottawa and work on those. And thank you again for being here today, and I'll pass it on to Debbie.
Well, thank you very much, Jasbir. And as I mentioned earlier, Jasbir is actually one of our critics on this bill. So he's been doing yeoman's service, and if it does go to committee, he will be on the committee that deals with the bill. But our job is to prevent it from going to committee. Now, we'll go to the gentleman at the back, and then I'll just close off the meeting. Okay, 2 more comments, and then we'll close it off.
Okay, I'm Matt Small. Can you tell us, are similar groups, there's 30 people here, are there similar groups across the country discussing this same thing, or are we the, so it definitely is this going on across the country. We're not alone.
Yeah, I know that one of our colleagues, Charlie Angus, held a big town hall forum in Toronto.
We're also planning to go into the prairies to find new friends and to.
Good. So there's organizing going on at sort of our kind of parliamentary level, if you will. Okay. Was there one other comment? Yeah.
Yeah. As you can say, the girl in the middle, your comments about going around, like using the re-mailers to circumvent the problem entirely. I mean, if that's absolutely true, then the whole discussion here is moot. But that would show up in what you mentioned about this happening in other jurisdictions in UK or whatever. Because if a similar type of law was instituted there, then the proliferation of re-mailers would be quite high, so that people would want to use that exact technology to get around it. Do you know if that's what's actually happened? Is there a lot more of these re-mailers available, or is there publicity showing people how to use the re-mailers to get rid of the, to circumvent the problem at all? In UK, for instance.
Don't know the UK on that particularly, but the general movement when you try to race technology like this is the bad guys, as the police keep referring to them, are way ahead, right? And that everybody else is caught in the dragnet, and that's typically what happens. If you have the motivation from something other than love of tech savviness and privacy to do this, if you have the motivation and the money to do this, then you're ahead of where that platform is. But meanwhile, we have population-based dragnet surveillance technology and capability. So typically, it's like an arms race. And we have to ask ourselves, at what point do we need to refine our tools so that the de facto default for everything isn't dragnet surveillance?
Okay, well, on that note, I think we'll close off. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much to our presenters tonight. You guys did a fabulous job. You have so much knowledge. And if it's not clear to all of us, it should be that really what we're talking about here, what works best is when we have a parliamentary and an extra parliamentary effort working together. and this is what we're trying to do. In fact, what's already being developed here. You've heard about how the NDP is the official opposition. We're fighting this bill. We've got all kinds of tricks up our sleeve, hopefully, in terms of what we can do. But we want to stop this bill going to committee. But we need to have a whole mass of things going on in the broader community, and we've talked about that tonight. I think there's been some fabulous ideas, and so I think now it's up to all of us to not say, well, it's somebody else who's going to do that. It's all of us who've got to try and figure this out together. So I hope you've got a lot out of the discussion. I learned a lot more about the bill. And I feel like more determined than ever that we got to stop this bill, that this is the one that we got to take on for a whole number of reasons. So I really want to thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to rabble.ca for live streaming the event. Thank you to Ellen for helping put this all together. There is a sign-up sheet on the way out, so if you would like to be kept in contact with, please consider signing that. And again, thanks to the folks at Open Media who've done such an amazing job of just the thousands of people that you've already gotten on board. And so now it's about sustaining that work, which is sometimes not easy to do. You know, people are really stretched. So we need to make this circle bigger and get more people involved. And I think there's a real sense of from people that we know that's what we've got to do. So thank you so much for coming. And, well, there'll be a lot more to do on this bill, and I feel like we've got a good shot at it. I really do. So thank you for coming, everybody.